Ratna Mandala Kamni Achayami
Sanje Chedan Soji Jana La Janju Badu Dani Je Dagwe Je Soji Chijinji Sanje Dula Benje Sanje Jo Sanje Chedan Soji Jana La Janju Badu Jani Dani and Dagwe Chijinji Sonanje Dula Benje Sanje Jo Sanje Chedan Soji Jana La Janju Badu Dani Dagwe Chijinji Sonanje Dula Benje Sanje Jo La La Midam Ji on Bodan Jajana Chidisha Chava Chava Sanja Sumara Zishin Deva Juru Juba Jachi Timbichin Diri Deva Jajin Diri Sarviti Tenjin Jabadala Chulu de Yango India Benja Jason Jimida Ambitani Levatula Tubesunin Namo La Yukataludan Jan Tribuna Dami Ganando Kunjano Tamja Do Dagwe Che Do Kongo what they do now, Omeba Niduso. Ishini Sameja Bemete La Chata Lo Oyada Kasore Tatisa in a Gilatan, Doji Tijila Doy Tijila, Dati Chawa Digisems, Daka Chawasi Digisems, Tinitawar Chuva Yims, Dati Chawa Digitan. Duji Pumbo Nam Dondi, Denisam Shetos. So, Chidayana Sonana, Dana Sinda Jabata. This is some Janam, then a Kunzo some Jasheto, Chenny, or Sona, Chen, that the conversation. Tambo de Dajichawa, Digism said, and Dadusim was in bit dancing the Digism, but Dajichawa Digism. So, Tini Dori Chua said, and you got it, Sana, or Tendi Tendrave, Dadu Chua Simbi, Zengangi, Kansa de, and the Tawanga Yanto, but or Tawanga Antono. Tinitara Joyins, Lucia Pumbo did on the tell us some Jansetos and our Pumbora Shinji to a tomba. Data Pumbora Shinji to a tombe. Lucia Pumbo did tell us some Jansetos, so Pumbo tell us Davi, Kansa tell us some Jansen. Tauna Kansa de Jojo Kanji or Sana, and it's Yala, Sonamla, then a Sinda Jabata. Cindy Yala Tobala, then a Sinda Jabana, and the Pumbo Totem la Dana Yang, and the O Kansa Jabati. Chitayala Tonan, then I said, Tishi Pumbo Namdana, on Kunzo Samja Shedo, Siagi, or that is a Tamani, or they get Tanya to them. Teacher Tambo Digi, Castle, Pavani Wodi, Tishi Pumbo did one day, the lesson Shevadin, Sagi, Ani Castle, or Tanadaba, Dame, when you don't go at it. Yeah.
This seat.
No, did you?
So here then there is a sutra passage which is quoted at the in Clear Words by Chandrakirti, and so here this verse says something like the grasping at a self, the cherishing or grasping at a self is like the mind of Mara, or like some kind of a demon mind, and so we project a sense of self or grasp at there being a self on the basis of the aggregates, although that is actually empty of intrinsic existence or inherent existence. We designate the self, the I, or the person on the basis of these aggregates in the same way that we, on the basis of all of the collection of parts, we designate a chariot, a chariot on the parts that compose it. And so the thing that we have designated designated is merely conventionally existent. So the first part of this verse is dealing with how ultimately all phenomena lack intrinsic or inherent existence. So this mind, which is grasping at some kind of a self that has some kind of intrinsic existence, is that which is like a demon mind, or the mind of Mara. And so we come to recognize that there is no such self that has a kind of intrinsic existence, but rather this is something that has been merely designated on the basis of the aggregates, in the same way that on the basis of the sort of parts of a chariot we designate chariot. So the conventional thing, the phenomenally existent thing, is what is designated upon that basis. But when we examine, ultimately, we can't find something that has that kind of intrinsic or inherent existence. So this quotation gets at the first part, recognizing that there is this lack of intrinsic existence, but that there is a conventionally existent object which is designated on a particular basis.
Oh yeah, that is 다도 집에 단전당 아니 다도 정경게 가서 따와 양도 홍도당 아니 제제라 아니 다도 좀 뽕뽕아라 아니 가서당 취지다음에 때나 바꿔와 그래서 가서도 취지다음에 풍부당 가사다 풍비딩의 수지 밤에 때나 봐야 다음에 반반 가사다 풍비친도 치 가사가다 취지다 가장 아니 가서 가담티 가장 아니 가사다 취지딩도 취시东西点不出吧嘎讲아니东西卡扎的缺牛的아니 가서를 타녀도양 여봐 쟤한테 어떻게 치마牛都是切进来的当然都是가서 군조 심지에写小这个让心情没讲아니 타녀 잠도切太吧군조도 여봐 다都是的点个话的대인단 다 깨라 가사게 담에 다와 땡라 배발라 아니 가사게 다와 땡라 배 기타 된다 지지 다다 타게 정도와 가사시 잠들라래 가나 돈이 도대到了切到了送堂돈이 도에 타수 교회나 돈이 도비 타수 토마 땡땡에 키바디 내쳐와 인수 다니와 가래를 따왔대라 배수들 다다다 디딘 바래 라 다따왔대라 배수세 따와서야지 다시 시원나서 가사 그 다음에 또 따와당 취이 다음에 또 따와니 오이 디니니 그 나네 토마 가사 그 다음에 따라 밥 디 예수 안에 취이 다음에 따라 밥에是吧？都是一般的。但当真一个节目参与干了，俺那区级当真俺来接呢，俺那看啥个当真接来接，是吧？俺那到我店了，别往多钱呢？俺那看啥个单位给到我店了，俺来怕呢？俺那区级单位给到我接了，把也挺这一般的，
So here then we need to recognize this grasping at a self, grasping at the self of persons, and the way in which our mind apprehends that particular self. And then we get to determining what the absence or what the lack of that self is like. So this is the point where we've arrived at in the text of determining the view. So we need to determine this view, the absence or lack of a self, with regards to both persons and phenomena. So when we recognize, when we identify what it is that this self is that we are grasping at, we refute that self. We refute that inherently or truly existent self. But when we do so, there isn't any sort of falling into an extreme of nihilism, because that self is still conventionally existent. So as this sutra passage made clear, clear, there is, when we refute the true existence, the intrinsic existence of that self, we're not refuting its conventional existence. So although there is no intrinsically existent self, inherently existent self, as we grasp at it, there is a conventionally existent self. So here, this we've now arrived in the text. It was talking about how first we need to have an acceptance of this more coarse form of dependent origination of cause and effect to avoid falling into the extreme of nihilism. And then we have now gotten to the point of how to determine the view. So in terms of determining or settling the meaning of emptiness or selflessness, there are two sorts of views that we need to deal with. There is the selflessness of the person, the selflessness or emptiness which is established on the basis of the person, and then the selflessness of phenomena. Now, in terms of our own way that we come to determine the meaning of selflessness or emptiness, we first do so in relation to the person, and then proceed to examining the selflessness of phenomena other than the person. But in terms of the way that we actually give rise to the grasping at a self, it is initially grasping at a self of phenomena, and then we give rise to the grasping at a self of persons. So in terms of the way that we go about realizing selflessness, we begin with the person and then move to phenomena. But in terms of the way that they actually arise for us, it is first the self, or the grasping at a self of phenomena, followed by grasping at a self of a person.
Oh yeah, that can do this and 当真以第二个王队前呢，去一单这个康萨单真俺来接吧，康萨去一单真给西线呢，康萨单真接吧。人家这边告诉，其实碰不进要把特色带了安全药，安全药呢来人天来的叫啊，上个了，他不碰不点路的是不点子的接。天呢，康萨点把这个点子接过来的，他看到的是呢，俺呢康萨拿完了。 大西碰不拿完了，对吧？大西碰不马拿完了，俺那看啥那样没吧？碰不落雨都上月过呢，俺那看啥落雨都做过，有的干啥？俺那碰不拿的，碰不点住就拿吧，碰不点住就马拿完了。我说阿王都出去，马那把那打我马，俺那看说的碰不拿住没把一张，碰不点住就拿完。 碰不点住就拿完一张，贴给碰不点把这边点阵的展现。 俺那提碰不得把这边点阵的按了接，天天看啥都拿对象了，提起来看啥得把这边点阵去学了结果吧，印章，学习当真去看啥个当真稀奇现在我得说过的，学习当真看啥个稀奇是了，学习当真按了接呢，提稀奇呢，俺那碰不了等了到人俺的。 点住是哪？碰不了点了代表我的点住是哪玩意子？哪玩贴给？啊，你碰不代表这边点真的干个玩意子？我去去当真俺来接呢，俺那看啥个当真接来接吧去，当真基本里面往多钱呢，几种个往多钱呢都是吧的。
So in terms of the way that we generate this grasping at a self, we first grasp at a self of phenomena, and then that brings forth the grasping at the self of a person or an I. And so, so long as we have the grasping at the aggregates as being truly existent or truly established, then we will, so long as we have that, we will have the grasping at the I or the self, the person, which is designated upon that basis of designation of the aggregates. And then when we have that, we have all of the rest of the branches of dependent origination, creating karma and so forth, and cycling in samsara. So it is because the aggregates appear to us as though they were truly established. We have this grasping at the self of phenomena, that we grasp at those aggregates as though they were truly existent. And it's on the basis of that, if we didn't have the appearance of of this basis of designation, the aggregates, then we wouldn't have the appearance of the I as being truly existent and the grasping at it as truly existent that comes from that. So first, because the aggregates appear to us as though they were truly existent, and we grasp at them as though they were truly existent, we then grasp onto the I, or the self, which is the person, which is designated on that basis. So, but initially we have to have the basis of designation, the aggregates, appear to us as though they were truly existent, and then that brings forth the grasping at a self of persons. So in terms of the order in which we generate these various types of grasping at a self, the grasping at a self of phenomena and grasping at a self of persons, the grasping at a self of phenomena necessarily comes first. We have the appearance of the aggregates as truly established, and then we grasp on to an I, which is truly established on that basis. So this is the order in which they arise for us, these types of grasping at a self.
Oh yeah, that dami ni tawa tala de bedi samba ane ngela khasa ke dami ke tawa tala pamne ane chi godo ane chi dami ke tawa tala baba se ga dami 我听啊，你看是他妈看啥个的，出去大没事的，他妈看啥个的都，啊你大没点了，他们呢，第一节了，啊你大西碰不这个地都点，大没点了爸爸，所以大没点了不碍事。哦，这主要不是对人看的人是啦，确实看啥个地都当大西碰不你见了呢，听一个哪呢，看啥个地都去，啊你大没点了，怕呢，到老了确实难去。 碰不定都多高啊！这看这个是呢，看啥小队咱把大西碰不了带呢大病，我大西碰不了带呢大病啊，那看啥是小把那些，我大西碰不了带呢大把了，多过我人上。 带呢大把了，带呢看上我也兄弟咱把看，大西碰不了带呢大病啊，我也说我人上，啊你看啥个定，前几天个领导碰不了带呢大把人，大把咱们已经碰不了，看上马多啊，然后都出发的，前些年就看啥定都去，那看啥去老，然后。 看啥的听了我当，看啥让心里毛主把多了我也让，啊你俺啦看啥让心里把带到带了碰，第一点咯，看了看啥子看了大卫大西可让，啊你让心里毛主把带了把也都是把的，
So, however, when you are determining or settling the meaning of selflessness, you go in the reverse order. So one begins by determining or settling the meaning of the selflessness of the person, and then moves on to determining the selflessness of phenomena. So among these two, between understanding the selflessness of the person and understanding the selflessness of phenomena, it's easier to comprehend the selflessness of the person. So one begins with that realization because it is easier. It is easier for us to understand that selflessness. So the self, the person, which is designated on the basis of the aggregates, it's easier for us to see that this is something which is designated dependently. So it is the self is imputed or designated on the basis of the aggregates. And so by examining in that way, we are able to see that this thing which is merely designated doesn't have any true or real existence. So determining the selflessness of the person is the way that we begin. This is easier to comprehend. And so first, having determined the selflessness of the person so designated on the basis of the aggregates, one then turns to looking at that basis of designation and coming to recognize that the basis of designation as well lacks intrinsic existence, is not truly established in any way. So when we are determining the selflessness of the person and phenomena, one goes in the reverse order from how these naturally arise.
Oh yeah, that tend to be any cause of the 강사가도 때라 배디 캐시는지 인바디 로아 단다 두시나체 단진이지 기름라 취지 단진이 강사가 단지 담면이지 되니랑 모두 강사가 담면 자와 깨네 뒤뭐 캐시니지 캐시네지 강사가 등도 또 나와당 아니 본비등도 또 나와 인전에 다 라빈가 알아들을 소하를 대체 다 강대랑 밥주기 아니 나 가서래 채시디 강사당 농시 강사당 봉보소네 뒤에도 강대랑 봐야 그래 가르래서 안 나도 맞아 봐 채기다 맞아 그 가르래서나 다 가서래 미리 탄 따바 마인바 라고는 주바 아니 시다벨라 지저가 소나 세체네 텔라 다제와네 현라라 말베 라신디 텔라 다제차와네 先看了呀，让马来别让心的，天没把你当没把我先我先看了马来别让心的没把的，你当没把，让马来把出把的，你他看说的，大都出把的这些。 当然，让王都主办，让个参与主，看上还是说几把这一把的。我到第七家扩张了，所以就干了。他那大姐叫往那先了，让买了别让心的，天没把你当没把我。这那样，俺那缺的看上去也往你是多的意思。但是碰上先看了呀，马上把出版的设计大都成为主菜。 大家看啥？先看了呀，让马来不出版的，俺那看啥做他都准备出菜钱呢，天他都没把的，俺那吃他看啥个大没把，说叫人把的，
So then when one is coming to determine the selflessness of the person and the selflessness of phenomena, it is easier to first realize the selflessness of the person, and then on the basis of that understanding, move on to recognizing the selflessness of phenomena. So as it says, in the 400 verses by Aryadeva, there is a verse which explains that something which doesn't have any sort of contingency, which doesn't rely upon anything else, that kind of true existence or real existence is what all things lack. So the sort of autonomy which allows them to not have to depend upon anything else, that sort of existence is what we refer to as a self. And the lack of that kind of existence is selflessness. So when we think that these aggregates, as they appear to us, as not having to rely or be contingent or dependent upon anything else, that is a sort of self of phenomena that is appearing to us, and the lack of that kind of self is the selflessness of phenomena. They're not established in that way that they appear to us as having some kind of intrinsic existence, which is not dependent or contingent upon any other kind of thing. And the self, which is so designated, or the person, which is so designated upon that basis of designation of the aggregates, is also lacking that kind of existence, whereupon it doesn't have to rely or be contingent upon anything else. So recognizing that although these phenomena and the person appear as though they had this kind of intrinsic existence, this autonomous existence where they didn't have to rely or depend upon anything else, they lack that sort of existence, and so we establish that they are selfless.
哦呀，他听人他等到你告诉，你看啥个单位，咱去一单位这一个东西吃不这的，我是马送我去。你看的中国人，当然别说的了，康熙宽带圈呢，他们这几次，原来那样如果买东西，没被带说康熙更新吧，天天三节基本那么修才能，是吧？康熙有些是宽带去圈那么是一个，好像是夸连一句忘给。 아니 가서로 코아서 이거等于了中年有难战的就通完马里边过来的来啥来提忘给 아니 가서래 내지 파자 샤니 아니 코아 사제 일이 좀뭐 렘바기 아니 코아 주비 좀 봐지 요라 코아 주비 좀 봐. 코아 주비 좀 봐다. 아니 양대세가 아니 코아랑 도비 좀 봐. kowa dobi rinpa yinza ane lene ji pumbo jilin shisha la dunga ji rashi le madeba yinza dunga mede na ane dunga ji jupan gowa yinza dunga jeji ki juji zawa kare re sana danzi mariba re danzi mariba pambe ane chikune lande le sabate ane le sabate to le sabate na le ji paja goye de yangsi chima yinzon jawa de dewa yinza ane te gaba juwa yinza ane kwan dobi rinpa singaro kwan dobi rinpa kwan de che se kwan jubi rinpa wangdo chewe che dang kwan lan dobi rinpa wangdo chewe ane che tamze ji se dunde nama luwa metong shing se gala mariba la tene niwa jawa penche ki le sabatang duche ki le sabatang mariba gabe ane duche gaba dunde niyo che mari gaba chumani duche nangu chume che mari gaba chuwani shewe tenyo kwambe sowa chene tashile sowa nashi che gana wo yinza dobi rinpi dunde tang kwan jubi rinpi wanda dunde nidi luwa meba shao rangshi ji ma zhu jiang kwanda ji chena rangshi ji ma zhu jiang kwa jubi wanda rinpi wanda chewe dunde ji che tang kwan dobi rinpi wanda chewe ane dunde ji chena luwa meba tongwa tang se rwa当然，没别说马家那这个，另外没把同心是，今天在他，我按那军多个人把身边，军多个今天在他，天天都交通那样，在他让心机出没个吧，让心机动吧，没被带说些话呢，认真的行为，按那卡说的。正当个有让心机出啊，没被带说看人关系吧。我没被带说看人关系吧的，没被带说让心机出啊，当比，你啷的？对呢，你养大别到上街机会啷了修吧的，是这个样的。叫我机会啷了一点比，干点他的摊位一几年，所以也给通上，我得他们养不到我的叫我一把，我听你上街机会啷了修，这当然是可能个做的挺的辛苦的，呀。
So here then, turning to the way of determining the view, we come to this next verse, verse number 10. And so here I'm going to read a different translation. So just to read through the verse, whoever, seeing the cause and effect of all phenomena, of cyclic existence and nirvana as infallible, thoroughly destroys the mode of misapprehension of these objects, has entered in on a path pleasing to Buddha. So here, whoever seeing the cause and effect of all phenomena, of cyclic existence and nirvana as infallible. So here, this is referring to the fact that one has to have a faith in the process of karma, in the karma or in the cause and effect that cause us to engage in samsara, as well as the sort of cause and that leads to the effect of nirvana, reversing the process of cause and effect that creates samsara or causes us to cycle within samsara. So one understands that the first link of dependent origination, ignorance, when you have ignorance, this causes you to engage in afflictive emotions and therefore create karma, putting down imprints on one's continuum, which will then in the future ripen, and one will continue in this cycle of having craving and grasping and finally existence and so forth. So as long as one has that kind of ignorance that leads you to create karma, then you will infallibly continue in samsara. These are the sort of stages that will lead without fail to one being cycling in samsara. And on the other hand, one recognizes as well that if one is able to remove that cause of ignorance, take away that fundamental cause, then that reverses this process of samsara. One is able to achieve nirvana, freedom from cycling in samsara, because if one takes away the root, this grasping at a self, this ignorance, then one no longer creates karma and so forth, and you are able to reverse this process of engaging with samsara. So one has seen that these are infallible, that all phenomena of samsara and nirvana, the process of engaging in samsara, of creating karma through having ignorance and so forth, is infallible, as well as the process of achieving nirvana, that if one removes those causes, then one will be able to achieve this sort of this freedom from samsara. So as long as we have ignorance grasping at a self, we will continue to cycle. This is what it means here when it says that a person who they see that the cause and effect of all phenomena of cyclic existence and nirvana are infallible. So although these are not intrinsically existent, they are still infallible. They're always, as long as we have ignorance, that is going to lead to taking up these contaminated aggregates and experiencing suffering. And if we're able to remove that cause, it's also infallible. We will be able to achieve nirvana. So continuing with this verse, it says then, so when you have seen that these two are infallible, but also that when you have thoroughly destroyed the mode of misapprehension of these objects as inherently existent. So one recognizes the way in which one is grasping at these objects as being truly or intrinsically existent, and has destroyed that mode of grasping, or the sort of focal point of that grasping, then one has entered into the path pleasing to the Buddhas. And we saw this in the earlier verses of the text when it said, like, listen well for those who and turn your minds to the path which pleases the victors. So here, this is sort of a reference to that, as entering into the path which pleases the Buddhas by having this understanding.
Oh yeah, sadi sikti sunga nasi da tende jewa tera tende duwa tiang kanshi jewa ki an tongshi cheche tenpares ta tajun kondu sheba nasi ani tongshi cheche kansa tang ani kansa cheche kansa sha yani dashi pumbo sha shana tigari ta tende di tende orana che gana kwa jubi rinpa tang kuan dobi rinpa di shewi chido ti tendu ane rangshi yin me jang ane kuan juba ki namsha tebi chi teba de shewi chido da kuan tenchi che ni wo di da donchi xa pa rin ma do ane xian donchi che che da kansa ka dam dan la baba yin da kansa che che na sunga tang ane che yi dame dan la baba zai yin na ane dashi pumbo che che na sunga chogo ya re rā yīrāṃ tī khuwa khuwi kāca jūnyāngi wādi rīmbāwā jī shīwī chīdū tā wāndā pati yīnjirī khuandā kī tīngdū āni tānā pēwādi kīyāṃ kāshī jī sō jī tōngshī chēchāyā sī kārā khuwa jūbī rīmbī wāndu chēbī āni rīmbā tāṃ dōbī rīmbī wāndu chēbī khuandā kī chē tam chēchāyā chē yunyā jī tāndī jī kāsa yunyā jī tāndī jī tāndī tāṃ sī kārā yunyā lāyā lūvā mē pa gyūla jē ho rwa mārī bāla tānā āni kāsa rē tāndī rwa chūmbā yunyā lā jī vī sū tāla kua nā tīkwa rē rwa tāndī yīmbī shirī sī tāndī dī yunyā lā jē wā āni mārī bāla tānā nīwā dūjī kī lē jē dūjī kī lē lā tānā nām shē tānā tānā āni tā kāsa rē dūjī kī dū nām shē kī tāndī kī tīngdū lē jī pāchā kuwa wā dī āni sō dē jē kī āni sīlāng kī sēpā tālā tānā āni pāṅbī tēwū tāng chūchē kī tēwū tīndū gyūwā yīn tāng rā pāñchē kī jūsum tāng āni chūchē kī pāñchē kī jūsum sīrī kāna nāmshē kī tāndī tī gyūdū kī nāmshē kī tāndī tī chālā pāñchē kī jūsum āni chūchē kī jū sīlāng sēpā sum 这个呢，俺旁在台嘛，用过旁在的中间都写过了。我顶着印象，但看见旁在当中在台的，让就俺们来越来结巴印象。俺呢，原来说是等着当是俺呢等着引不起是的，等着了，就这样来结巴给等着打了过去。没被带说说起主菜单是没被带说抗细胞啥的，他就缺他们家，没些别说抗细，缺宽带抗细宽带缺了他们家记忆啥的，你缺他们家接送呢？他们家这是宽带就对于缺他们家缺钱是哪玩意呢？俺们缺他们家缺钱来说过的，是吧？宽带就对于缺他们家缺钱，让现金马主的举钱来给予钱的是了呢。俺们宽带就对于缺他们家是科瓦当倒闭人不往的交瓦的，科瓦倒闭就被人不往这什么，多呢？虽然那么就怕去缺他们家。是吧？虽然那么就把就去他们家让给下来的呢出版呢是大样，下来的呢出版是呢，但这的推荐来给我咱们来都当了国外几个钱，但这的俺那卡手的，他来带着查出去一个了，俺那让给下来的呢出版。让个下来出版，等这个参议审院长，让个下来的呢出版呢，他年都觉得路啊没法趟，是要这个等你打的钱，是吧？打的，哎呀。
Okay, so here then the basis upon which we are establishing emptiness, the basis of the self of persons and the self of phenomena. So here, again, as it says in this verse, whoever seeing the cause and effect of all phenomena of cyclic existence and nirvana as infallible, so they recognize that even though all the phenomena within cyclic existence and beyond, even though they are not intrinsically existent, cause and effect are infallible, are tenable, are reasonable, and they follow after these. So although one recognizes that these don't have any sort of intrinsic or true existence, cause and effect are still unfailing. They will never lead to opposite effect. So the subject here of this sort of logical proposition is that, and I'll turn to this translation here, the line, when for all objects, gives us the subject under consideration. So all phenomena within cyclic existence and beyond. So here, again, this is looking at the sort of stages of engaging with samsara and the stages of reversing from samsara. So on the basis of having ignorance, when we have ignorance, that causes us to then create karma, which then leads to having puts down sort of imprints upon a consciousness, which then ripens into various results from those actions that we have committed in the past. And so there is this cycle wherein we are creating these causes that propel us to continue to take rebirth, and those establish sort of results of having propelled ourselves. So we take up a birth, take a new rebirth, and then have craving and grasping, leading us to then take on another birth again. And so there are those causes which propel us to continue to take rebirths, and those which result from this process of us engaged with ignorance and giving rise to karma and so forth. And so all of these stages of dependent origination, the 12 links of dependent origination, are infallible. So long as one has this ignorance, one will continue to be propelled through this cycle. And if one removes that ignorance, if one is able to take that away, one reverses this process. One is able to achieve nirvana, which is also unfailing. unfailing. So cause and effect never fail for all phenomena. This is referring to everything all sort of phenomena that one could put under consideration. So this is then the subject of this syllogism or logical proposition. So here then it says the line about when for all objects gives us the subject under consideration, what we will see as being empty or lacking intrinsic establishment, intrinsic existence. So all phenomena within samsara and nirvana are seen then, then it says, all of the, when for all objects cause and effect is seen as being unfailing. So cause and effect here is meant to give us the classical logical reason proving that things are empty because they are interdependent. So here then the subject of this argument is all objects or all phenomena, and then the logical reason being applied is because they are interdependent, and that leads us to the sort of premise that is being proved, that they lose all one doesn't grasp at them as being truly existent, having recognized that they are dependently originated, thus proving that they don't have any sort of intrinsic existence as we normally see them as having. Oh, sorry. I didn't. So the expression all objects refers to each and every object from basic physical matter on up to the omniscience of a Buddha. So they all exist independent upon their parts. So in a manner of speaking, their cause and effect can never fail. So the antithesis which we seek to disprove is that these objects could have a solid existence that they appear to have, that they could exist naturally. So we recognize that all objects are dependent upon causes and conditions, and therefore they are dependently originated, but they also all exist independent upon their parts. So this too calls up their dependent originated status, and so because they exist independence upon their parts, then they can't have the sort of intrinsic existence that we project on them.
Oh yeah, that didn't 아니 가자라시 주에 가야지. 라시 규제를 때는 제장 라시지 마루장 아니 가서 gün에 지나서 대부 누가 매번 쇼트봐. 다 최담제 최전도 소나 최담제 소는 남녀 바지 최담제 최전 랑기 차샤를 때는 주변나 탄녀도 gün에 매바다 탄녀 gün에 누가 매봤으나 최탐제를 개탄녀도 gün에 누가 매봐셔요 말봐 네 gün에디 귤에 저우자와 그 저우 gün에 많이 봐채 아마 그 gün에디 규단 제부 제지 뒤 gün에라샤 네 gün에디 남바 샤죠 gün에라 是吧？那个接下来的呢，就完了。他也对那把下界，那把想叫给军队路外面把汤，我是这，那把想叫给军队路外面吧。俺们的，俺那接个军队路外面吧。我对我们的那个军队，接个军队路外面把下算了，俺呢缺钱了，缺他们家的，虽然他们就把就缺他们下呀嘛的，下出一个嘛的，是吧？军队虽然就把就缺他们家，接军队路外面把嘛的话，没有在地那把下出了钱呢，缺他们家接，虽然他们就把就缺他们家是，俺那规定上吧，让个钱下来的呢，主要印章，俺那他也对那把下出个军队路外面把的。 是没有把印章，俺那家家让兴趣出品，没得戏呢，等把出版，让兴趣出品，我就算没把到完的，俺那 마시 좀 매바데 안에 다 두치라 챘네是吧 대도에 로데 안에 자와지 벨람데 다 디tun데 소고서데 대주나 봐 샤죠 마잖아 안에 대디 대워라면 그래 통도 하고 서 근데 대라나 봐 샤죠 그 주제다 제제제제 그 주제에서 이요래
No. 아니 니바디 토고레.
최탐제 최대서 와다 나봐 샤죠 그 주제 루와메 봐 랑게 샤샤라 때는 좋아 인상 나봐 샤죠 그 주제 루와메 봐
So here, then again, the subject of this logical argument is all phenomena, from basic physical matter on up to the omniscience of a Buddha, and then the sign that one is putting forth to then establish that these objects, that all of these phenomena are not intrinsically existent or intrinsically established, is that they are dependent upon causes and conditions. They rely upon causes and conditions. They're dependently originated. And so it's not just that they rely upon causes and conditions, but they all exist in dependence upon their parts. So here the sort of logical argument being made is that the subject, all phenomena from the basic physical matter up to the omniscience of a Buddha, are all dependently originated, and therefore they can't have this kind of intrinsic or true existence. So that destroys any sort of object grasped at as having any kind of true or intrinsic existence. So by laying out this sort of proposition, one is able to establish then that phenomena don't have that kind of existence. So here, again, by recognizing that cause and effect are unfailing, that the fact that that phenomena rely upon causes and conditions as well as relying upon parts, means that this object that we are refuting, the kind of intrinsic or true existence, this is negated. So we establish that then objects necessarily are lack that kind of intrinsic or true establishment. And so it's on the basis of recognizing, that, laying out this reasoning, the fact that first that all phenomena rely upon causes and conditions, seeing those causes and conditions as so the difference between the causes and conditions and the parts, I'm not getting. No. So here, it's by coming to recognize that cause and effect are infallible, and this here is referring to that they are proving that things are dependently originated. So the fact that they rely upon causes and conditions and rely upon their parts destroys this object that we would grasp at, this true or real existence that they have. So it is by laying out this sign that one establishes the thesis. So the sign is that all phenomena, are dependently originated in terms of being reliant upon causes and conditions, as well as being reliant upon their parts. And so therefore, they couldn't have this kind of true or real existence. So one proves that through this kind of reasoning, this logical syllogism.
앉아서 가을에 뒤마서 다 머리 받이 과제 뒤마서
각자 랑싱이 주변 미
가르치랑 가을 뒤마서
You ask it.
가르쳐 맞을 때 내려고 그러셨대. 那么想做个军队，那么想做个军队，确实当天那么想这个主，参么的，是吧？对么些人能够当都能够来说话，那么脚把这边绝对参么的。参么的出版了在那确实下效果的话，那么想做个军队就确他们这里要的，让脚这个参么的给让你小把人张，得了军队。这个军队嘛，因吧，让脚这个参么的，安尼确的小土把人张，是吧？安尼可能那把想做个军队是，脚这个参么的就当可以加为参下在的结果，那把想做个军队是啊，好我说，是吧？你当面的我没大把的我应当没大把前面出把的没大把月把的开的人是呢，前面出张没大把下小把的话，前面没准那没大把下小过嘛的话，一张没大把的前面出没大把前面出讲没大把的，那把下就找这个前面的就当安尼没大把过上前面开的这不是那么下就。另外最近哪个的为呢？另外最近哪个前面出东西的为呢？东西都比落地给前面出把了，带来东西下个是吧？东西都比落地东西前面没这东西下巧没的话，现在那把想巧个军队赛的，对么钱了？对现在对么钱你干了哇？得了这些没搞钱，现在的去昨年那么一个把去他们家，让给签下了对呢，出把印章。按你交这个钱嘛，这个让你小都把印章，那么想这个军队就组织的，军队真正把来想呢，按你说那么这个把就去他们这了大帮忙不要的，等这个军队真正把嘛的话，你那么想军队加快对应的人，
So here, I missed something. So there is there's cause and effect. So in terms of being dependently originated, in here where it says that cause and effect never fail, if we were to only understand that as reliance upon causes and conditions, or the whole and the parts and so forth, that couldn't apply to everything. So for example, with uncompounded space, the valid cognition which posits uncompounded space is the sort of cause that leads to the result of the thing so posited. So in this way, then everything which exists is dependent upon the valid cognition which posits it. So you have this relationship of cause and effect between this would even apply to emptiness. So you can't posit emptiness, you can't have emptiness without the valid cognition positing emptiness. And so all phenomena, so if we were to only understand this as being like things that rely upon causes and conditions, then there are many permanent phenomena that wouldn't be subject to dependent origination. But here, everything from basic physical matter up to the omniscience of a Buddha is subject to this level of dependent origination, of necessitating the valid cognition, positing the object as being like the cause and the effect as being the thing posited. So you could have this even in the case of emptiness, as would be dependently originated in this sense. Did that get okay?
No, yeah. That did it. Raja quarter, Quaji Zawa Danze Mariba de la Tubus. That Quaji Zawa Danze Mariba de la Tubai. What Danze Mariba de la Tubala, Techebala, and the castle, Dameto Vichera Jungure. Dameto Vichera Joko, the Tawashana, you are that's it. 대신 말이 미중고스 대신 말이 미중고스 최남진내로 지다와 신도 도비 지다와 지원 무슨 또 지다와 신도 로데 관발라 때네 아니 단전 그 말이 받아 방화대 연구이장 말이 가봐 주와니 세외 tenyu 관바 소서 말이 가봐 주와니 세외 tenyu 관바 소서 그러니까 말이 가봐 쳐봐라 아니 세외 tenyu 관바 소서 그러니까 사모당반이 또 별로데 공고래 세외 tenyu 관바 인자 대 관바네 아니 자와 말이 봐 빵디 잡아 아니 rimba shindu ani le tu ma rimba che tende ya la chunyi ka ke gaba chugu wa yin da mari gomba che ba ne shiba tenyi gomba che dan tenyi ko de ani ya na la ma no ka ge song du wa ta de ji je me do ke che ba la mari ba je che ba la ta me do be she ra ke ko gre ta me do be she ra ke ba la ani ta me be ne lu ten la be lu ani ye ba ra ani 자주 라를 숨바 따르 단내시 제바세 쇼아레 와 내시 제바세 데 가장에 වෙ네 차왕에 වෙ네 아니 dim비 직장에 වෙ네 아니 dim비 투장에 වෙ네 내시 제바티레 와 어다 아니 디 내시 제바소 토마데라 가차데 칸데레서 가차데 내와체 아니 가차데 내위가 가라 아니 가차데 춤나原来这单他妈卡中的要过来，这单他妈卡中的买那没个话印章，店主员呢，俺那店主这单他妈卡中的要过来，是吧？我店主个这单他妈卡中的另外一看，俺那店比他妈马主吧，店比他妈团那那些要吧，店比这单团那那些要吧印章，店比团长个员呢，店比这单差员呢。是吧？但点比这单他妈卡中的买呢，点把买吧。现在这单他妈原来这单卡中的要过来，这单他妈卡中的买呢，俺的买个话印章，点把准备这单他妈卡中的买呢，点把买个话印章，千万个问题是他的结话节目提我了，卡说的。差点就那许钱，是是，俺来提钱，俺来点的火上的搞出去，俺那说，点比紧张的那些的家长那边呢。
啊，给你送下去了，一直领着呢。
呀，这样就是忙这个社会啊，他这老是。
He's just going to keep going, really.
안에 되더라. 내시 잡아서 다 자나 내장 내시의 가르래서나 가장에 위네. 아니 dem비 직장에 위네. dem비 투장에 위네. 차왕에 위네. 신내시오들이. 야.
So then here again, going back to the text, if we look for the very root that keeps you and I going round in this circle of life, we come down to ignorance, to our grasping at a self. So here again, the fundamental root or cause that is causing us to cycle in samsara is this grasping at a self. And in order to cut that root, this grasping at a self, we have to develop wisdom which perceives that no such self exists. So here there is a verse from Root Verses on Wisdom by Nagarjuna where he gives this scenario that in order to be able to cut that grasping at a self, we have to habituate ourselves to the wisdom recognizing that there is no such self. So it is by developing, by cultivating that wisdom that we are able to remove this ignorance, which is the fundamental cause of cycling in samsara. And if we are able to turn back that ignorance or remove that ignorance, we remove the whole cycle of the 12 links of dependent origination. If we don't have that ignorance, then the rest of the links can't come forth. So it is by developing this wisdom which recognizes the lack of that kind of self, which realizes selflessness, that we are able to overcome this. So if we were to discuss what no self is in any detailed way, it would be best to apply a number of sections from the works on the stages of the path. One example would be the fourfold analysis. So here, these are sometimes called the four essential points, and they are as follows. So first, we need to identify the object of negation, to clearly delineate what it is that we are negating or refuting. And so that is the first of these points. And then the second of them is to identify the pervasion or the sort of entailment that is necessary. So this means that if something exists truly, then it has to exist truly in as one or as many. So here we have to understand that if something has this kind of true existence, there's only it can only be like sort of a singular thing or different separate things. There's no way that something that is truly established could be either some third alternative. And then one turns to the point of recognizing that the self is not truly existent as the same as the aggregates, and the self is not truly existent as separate or different from the aggregates. So it's by going through these 4 points that will come here now in the text that one can come to a kind of understanding of selflessness by going through each of these 4 points.
Oh yeah, 전다 텐데체 아니 다 제가 아니学ten데 마 차사서라 스티제시나 레장은 단디 잡아서잖아 레장 디 텐데지 텐데라 텐데 따위는가 도대체 쉬나 하소아 다 가서래 그냥 쉬었다면 다시 도시를 때내 좀 왔어 다시 아니 가래서는 배나 가사 있는 다시 풍부 是吧 다시 풍비 띵도 아니 도저히 도배 아니 가사세 따와라 때내 좀 와이다 그냥 쉬었다면 다시 다 도시를 때내 좀 와. 다 텐데 세지 가서래 接下来电呢出来拉起来 아니 아니 비전에电呢出来起来 아니 다시 테라电呢 도저히 도바 아니 다월电呢出来起来 다 숨제가 대선도 가라 쉬었다면 다시 다 도저히电呢 중앙래 是吧 근데 다 도저히 도발라 맞대봐 아니 다시 도저히는 동충안에 테라 맞대봐서 다 다중한테 다 제와니 셀라라 말레바데 셀라 mam바 셀라라 말레라신데 테메반데 다메바 오라인바 오테 나시테 셀라라 말레바 셀라 맞대봐 아니 라wan도 추바 메바데 라wan도 추바데 가장게 내체
So here then we'll go through this brief presentation of these 4 vital points or 4 essential points concerning the correct view and using the classical reasoning based on dependent origination. So it says here then when we have any sort of object, every existent object is a product of something to be given a name or a basis of designation and the act of designation. So there is not a single atom of anything in the universe which does not rely on this process. There is nothing which exists from its own side. So if we take, for example, the person is designated on the basis of the aggregates. So there is that designation of person and then the basis of designation. And so in that way, they are independently originated. So in the way that we give things a name, or we give a name to a basis, that process of imputing or designating is a type of dependent origination. So like the way that all phenomena are dependent upon causes and conditions and dependent upon parts and so forth, there is then this third level of dependent origination wherein the basis of designation and the act of designating that designation are a way of dependency or contingency reliance. So as I said yesterday, there is And having any sort of existence which is autonomous or independent, which doesn't have to rely or depend upon anything else, this is the sort of existence that is being negated. So when we are identifying this object of negation, what it is that we are refuting through logical analysis, we come to see that this kind of existence where a phenomena doesn't rely or depend upon anything else, wherein it has some sort of existence from its own side, which doesn't entail this process of designation, that sort of existence is absolutely impossible. So nothing whatsoever it doesn't rely upon this process of being designated upon a basis.
Oh yeah. Oh, tell me about what I'm going to try to do. Maybe. Tell, I need to listen to you to part that one. 吕阳阿卡萨马因，三명卡萨马因，22个错把点卡萨马因，但他就也跟俺就弄这个告诉，是吧？告诉其他人了错那么，但那新的就要把打人。提醒父母那在那工作上面学教我学什么那些新的人了热哇。新的人了，人我新的买；新的人了，错把点新的买；新的一车样错把买。那新的现在就开始是呢，错把贴了点呢，按大把怎么说？错大些新的人了，错把贴了点呢，大把怎么出完那新钱呢？那点了加上过的，是吧？吕阳按照卡萨买，三명卡萨买。是吧？哦，你是错把样看啥没？我那看话的是了，你是错比顶多大把咱们都看啥中国的是，碰不赢的个那样，碰不我的人那没，碰比是安尼，哦，碰不错把样没，碰我错把样没没啥，安尼碰不错把个一样没。哦，他没白人的，他看啥看得起来个话的是呢？天气大些错把的顶多，俺那大把咱都没给怕大把咱都有话的是，他看上。看是他这了住的必须玩吧，我听那些他有话的是，但是的话，所以嘛都要扩张跟我呢处处啊没是，你说么一人来讲，俺那人跟我呢处啊有嘛的是，
So here then it says, taking for example the I too then am a product. Someone has taken two things together, my body and my mind, and called it me. I am nothing more than that. So if we examine like this, the I, the self of the person is designated on the basis of the body and the mind. But the I, the person is not the body. The I is not the mind. It is not the collection of those two together. We can't pinpoint that I within that basis of designation. So as this verse which talks about the chariot, where it says that the chariot is something designated on the basis of the collection of its parts. It isn't any of the individual parts, it isn't the collection of the parts together, it isn't the arrangement or shape of those parts, but rather it is a mere conventionality designated on that basis. So in the way that the chariot is something which is merely designated on the basis of those that collection of parts, so too the body and the mind serve as the basis for designating the person, the I, but the I is neither the body nor the mind. It's not the collection of body and mind. And if we were to take the basis of designation as the 5 aggregates and divide it that way, the I is not any of the individual aggregates. It's not the collection of those aggregates. It's not the shape of those aggregates, but rather it is something which is merely designated on that basis of the aggregates. We can't find an I or a person that exists from the side of the aggregates that exists without this process of designating it as such. So as the example I used yesterday of the designating snake on a striped rope. There's nothing from the side of that object, but rather it's only due to our power of designating it as such that we can talk about this snake existing. So there is no me which exists from its own side. There is no me which does not rely on someone taking my body and mind together and granting it the name. So here again, we use this sort of logical analysis to see that the I is not each of the individual body and mind. It's not the collection of those, but rather is something merely designated on that basis.
我呀，等这一章，那他61人然后就出来要骂的是，打得了，打着就搞把这军战者就搞把这人啊，打困在你就比军队缺那么缺太大。缺钱了钱呢，咱没被咱说的看这人是呢，那晚上个我又出发在的，看见先看了呀，马对吧？先看了呀，让马来为让往都出发的没被咱说的下来。是吧？然后呢，出发军赛家没赛这个，我看这些人是呢，看情况就希望那些先看了呀，马对吧？先看了呀，让马来把给让往的出发希望马的是。没嘛，他们话的看这人是呢，当地人不是，当地人是，云南看这是呢，当地人不是，他的以前的机会当地人不是搞的呢，他的看的云南个缺上关人呢。当地人不吃是，遇见了机会当地人不吃是呢，遇见了结巴人上，你遇见闲了啥来吧是吧？遇见闲了啥来吧，马啥来吧人上，你遇见闲了让马来吧的马是吧？是吧？人上。刚见了啥来吧，特别让心启动心思；刚见了啥来吧，特别让心推动心思。咱这对吧？那态度啊，其他那个我看一那样，我觉得遇见了结巴人是，见了啥来吧人是，见了啥来吧人上，见了对我人是。见了啥来？见了对吧？人上见了啥马来吧太阳马来吧见了马对吧的东巴的是吧？人上对了马对吧东巴人上，你电视机没被打手，然后你出发去参加要马的，没被打手可还是呢？对的，就健康。看了呀，让马来吧当看了呀，马对吧让往出发的没被打手的钱。以前闲了结巴人上，你闲了让马来，闲了对我的，你闲了让来吧的，闲了对我的，闲了让来吧人上，没被得是闲了让马来吧当，闲了马对吧的，西吧的，这去吧的，
So here then again, the I, the self, is not the body and the mind or taken together, but rather is something which is merely designated on the basis of the body and mind, and neither, in fact, do my body or my mind themselves exist from their own sides as well. So not only is it the case that the person is designated on that basis of the body and the mind, but if we were to examine the body and mind themselves, they don't exist from their own side in some sort of autonomous, independent, intrinsic way themselves. So here then, it lays out a logical kind of proof for this. So the subject, all phenomena of samsara and nirvana. So these are they have none of the true and solid existence that I hold them to have. They cannot exist on their own because they are interdependent. So what one is negating or refuting is this kind of independent, sort of essential establishment from their own side, which means that they wouldn't rely or depend upon anything else for their existence, not relying upon any other sort of cause or effect or parts or anything like that. So here, the reason that is being used to prove this is dependent origination, and as we see in other verses, like from the Praise of Dependent Origination by Jelama Tsongkhapa, whatever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. Because to rely upon other things, to be contingent or dependent, is in direct opposition to having this kind of autonomous or existence which doesn't depend or rely upon anything else. So having an existence which is contingent or dependent is necessarily the opposite of having some kind of existence where you are set up from your own side, not having to rely or depend upon any other thing for one's existence. So here, what is meant by dependent origination is that all objects are interrelated with others on which they depend. That is, they occur through dependence on other objects. This is why there is absolutely no way they can exist on their own. So when one comes to recognize that all phenomena are dependently originated, this destroys any sort of focal object where you see them as having some kind of true intrinsic existence without this sort of reliance or contingency. So as it says in the translation here, they have none of the true and solid existence that I hold them to have. So like it says in the verse itself, when for them they lose all solid appearance. This phrase is sometimes translated as like focal object or object. Here he's translating it as solid appearance, but this is because it is referring to having some kind of existence which is non-contingent, which is non-dependent. And when one fully realizes the way that things are dependently originated, all sort of grasping at that kind of an object is completely destroyed or refuted. And so they are, this sort of existence is in our minds completely refuted, because we see that if things are dependently originated, there's no way they could have that type of existence.
Oh yeah, the J Sundegi, any Sundua, Arandula Gacha, when they said the Gala, and Shella Ramalava, Shella Mateo, the Lola Chalela Sutri. Nesi Chabadan, Dindule, and Shella Ramalava, the Lebade. 以前闲了啥来把它带来闲了啥没来就把的，俺你带起来了，看看见了啥来吧，太太让心太清，启动心，数把太来也三百年种出的继续有些，太来啥话就来把大麦就没送过的，是吧？我的啥说的，俺那马这些都告诉第一早晚的，康熙见了叫我太没见，天天基本上心越嘛，见了啥来看的当下去。 看的看个学就怕有人说的是，康熙见了叫我太没些些是，其他那个我看到看一那样，逐渐现了叫我的，让我干嘛叫我的，是吧？康熙见了叫我太没的。 你对了，这位让我有嘛的，让我们叫嘛人的，见了啥来把我先了对我的话，先了让对我印象，让家怕别我，让我都出个地方嘛的是，是吧？我印象他看这是吃了说的对我的，但是见了叫我太没见，听你这位让些人们见了啥来看的当下下是一个了，就见先了啥来把印象，就见先了啥嘛来把这。 当把的，就先先了对我一张，就先先了马对把给，俺马对把的给当把的，哦。
So here then, when we are identifying this object of negation or the object of refutation, what we are identifying is some sort of existence that is not dependent upon causes and conditions, that is not dependent upon anything else, on any sort of other, but rather some sort of autonomous or self-sufficiency, independence that doesn't have to rely or depend upon any other causes and conditions for its arising. So there is the verse that says that whatever is whatever is generated by causes and conditions, or whatever arises from causes and conditions, that is said to be unarisen, because things are not produced. So whatever is dependent upon causes and conditions, that is empty. So when you have a situation of something being dependent upon causes and conditions, dependent upon other things for its coming into being, then that is not intrinsically existent or intrinsically established. So that's why it says that whatever is arisen from causes is unarisen. It's not arisen due to some sort of intrinsic nature, inherent existence, but rather it is dependently originated. And so whatever it is that arises in that way, that is considered to be empty, to lack that kind of intrinsic existence. So whatever has this sort of interdependent origination, it cannot have the kind of non-contingent, non-dependent existence in the way that it appears to us. So in terms of identifying this object that we are trying to refute or negate, we need to see the way that the object appears as though it had some sort of existence which was totally not dependent upon others, which was independent and autonomous, able to set itself up from its own side, because that is what we are negating, what we are trying to refute here. So this is established by the fact of its being dependently originated, that it can't have that kind of existence because it has arisen from causes and conditions.
군단 전배양게 디송아리 간절에 저와 태매지 태니 집에라시 여마이 제라라래 간데 동시 송스 송텔에 사와 던주메 텔에 사와지 땡땡 요 말에서 제 초사 집장 내면나 대점지 돈이 또 니데 전에 어디 텔에 삼로 야보 땅체 텔에 사조지 땡요 말에 인상 진데라 규전 초사 집장한테 텔에 삼로 야보지 땅잖아 아니 돈이 또 그래 전에 들이송이 개왕하면
So this verse then that says that whatever is produced from causes and conditions, that is unproduced, and whatever comes from causes and conditions, that is said to be empty. And there's no more sort of clear teaching of this. If you are trying to come to a realization of emptiness, this is the way by which one should proceed, to recognize that a kind of existence which is independent and non-contingent is in direct contradiction with all things being dependently originated. And so this is taught very clearly here by this reasoning.
Oh yeah, that day, Pekuna did Sunja. Then as you want the rang and the troop that meba, Pena say, that in the castle leisure is a good. Roa, Quembe Unze Dang, and you use Bumbo so go and ask. And you Page Bumbo Tella, you just can't on there under the Yavam, Bumbo Tella, and Bumbo the Gurg, you see than them. Yevi Unzelina, Unze do Yevi, Unze Dashi Tama Mishila, Dashi Tama Mishilas. Dashi Tama Mishilas. Unze do Yevi Dashi Tami Mishila. And it turned out can be the Unze Yin say, and they only mean the Patamto, Dawatanto. Ming Mata Bado Unze Matu. 아니 문제 그 여제 창화기 아니 미실라 여제 창이 되라 칸비 민게파 이 문제 인세 민게 다바잠도 아니 다잠도 문제 출발해 와 시 민게 파마다 봐도 문제가 다시 초장 문제도 맞죠 라 가서래 좀 민 파르마다 바 당보네 운자란들이 추가시가 말했어. 그와 칸라 다사기 가사 되게 다시 공부되다 요아래데 민게 마사 봐도 당보네 운자란들이 추가시게나 아니 그 아마 그래서 아니 이거 차이로 왔는데 대선도 매대마 매게 파르마다 봐도 언제 다시 초자 언제 좀 뭐도 매대 파르마다 당번에 아니 란 언제 란들이 아니 주바시 되나 연하스 아니 다 가서 언제 그런 게 세디 아니 가서래 아마아마 땡아마아마야 안에 되게 언제 인거 같아 경고래서야.
So, to lay out an example of this and how it is that nothing can exist on its own, from its own side, so we can take the example of the way we appoint a chanting master of a monastery or the governor of some district or any similar figure. So first, there must be a reasonable basis to be called a chanting master. There must be a person who is worthy of being the chanting master. But just having that sort of collection, that basis of designation, does not make that person a chanting master. Because then there must be someone like the abbot of the monastery who says, he is now chanting master. And until the abbot does so, until the abbot applies the name and the concept to this person, he cannot be the chanting master, even though he may have all the qualities you need to be named a chanting master. So it is only through this process of designation, through someone who is qualified, like an abbot, making this designation to a basis that is properly qualified. But before that actually takes place, before the abbot says, this is now the chanting master, that person, even if they have all of the qualities and qualifications in that basis of designation, they're still not considered to be the chanting master. So you need this act of designation, of giving a name to something to actually make them into the chanting master. So if it were not that way, if it were the case that they were established as always established as having been the chanting master somehow from their own side, so if this were not the case, if you didn't need to have this process of designation and naming, if the person were somehow the chanting master from the beginning, all on his own, without anyone putting the name or idea on him, then he would have to have been the chanting master all along, from the time he lay in his mother's womb. So if it were the case that something were naturally or intrinsically established as something like this chanting master, then it would be the case that in his previous lives as well, he would have had to be considered the chanting master. And at the time when he was in his mother's womb even would have to be the chanting master. But this we can see is not the case. He only becomes the chanting master by means of this process of designation. Without that, there is no chanting master from the side of that individual.
다시 언제 왜 차와시라 아니 도저히 참아시기 언제 인시파 또배마다 봐도 아니 콜라 언제 메세 아니 언제 메세야 맞아 코란 그냥 언제 인냐밖에 로메 아니 도저히 참아 가서 저 언제 인노세 아니 대 가서 가사신 아니 다 언제 본부 대단한테 이세 아니 또 건강하게 가사 되게 아니 껴와나 아니 언제 인시 껴와나 아니 또배 파다 점도 아니 또배 파 점네 파 다점네서 어디 다점네 문제당 아니 문제 세계를 문제 출발을 권한 문제를 언제 출발했어 코랑기 장 언제 인야바 총하다 미현지양 고 언제를 생각 총하자 대장 또 언제 세대 언제 그 다시 띵도 매게 파다잔만 마도 다시 랑은 출발시 담매와 됐어요.
No. So here, as it says, in the case of like the chanting master, he's not the chanting master from the beginning, but rather this is something that occurs by this process of designating him. So if he was chanting master all along, then he should have been, even from the time he was born, referred to as the chanting master. Like as soon as he came out of his mother's womb, here comes the chanting chanting master. But people didn't say it because getting to be the chanting master depends upon many other factors. So one has to have this kind of process of designation, the abbot or whatever appointing him to be umze and doing that process of naming, of designating, such that he even has a sense, oh, I am the umze, I am the chanting master. But without that, there's nothing from the side of the object, nothing from his aggregates or from the body and mind of that person that says, I am chanting master. It doesn't. There's no sort of intrinsic or inherent existence, but rather through this process of designation, designating this person to be the chanting master, without that we can't have this idea of a chanting master. So we don't call someone chanting master until there is a basis to give the name, a monk who is fit to be chanting master, and until a person qualified to give him the name hangs it on him and says, this is the chanting master. Neither until this time does the person himself think, I am the chanting master. So he, before being designated as such, doesn't have that concept himself. But once the concept has been applied to him, you are the chanting master, then people start to talk about him as chanting master, and he too begins to think, I am the chanting master. But this doesn't come about intrinsically or inherently from his own side.
Oh yeah, that jibare shatima. Oh, tata boyang ta se kala. Ane ta korangi, ane pumbo da shewani chobam. Ana ta tigi pumbo nga chobala tene, chobi tindu. Ane ta she, ane pumbo da baza mado ta korangi pumbo nga rawando ta zane meba.
So there's also the example of a horse. The case is the same with something like a horse. We take the body and the mind of the horse and we put them together. We take all the proper causes and conditions together and label them with the name horse. But it's not like there is something from the side of the aggregates, the body and mind of that horse that has that the horseness from its own side.
Oh, that is into Kamba, Dashi Sobala, then a Tabatamre, Tambo Kamba di Jamni. And a Kamba, Kami Kajatai, Kajan and Javche, and it then they come at Dabo di Ding, and then Yakan Sugar, Yamdi, Tobatawata, and the Tobatawata in Yakantum. And the desert is sitting room sugar, now with Tobata to Tamana, and you could sit room to Tobata and the show. Rungan there, Ding Rungan sugar, Yambata, Yambatigana, and the Rungan Tobata to Amato, Tobamata Bado, and the campus of Mejuba.
And so a building is the same as well. Nothing but a name put on a certain collection of parts that act as the basis to receive the name. So say we are building a house with different rooms and so forth. It's not like each of those rooms has from its own side its own existence. It is rather we designate that. Once we have built up this house and have multiple rooms, we designate one as like the sitting room and this is the bedroom and so forth, but they don't have that from their own side, absent of our designating them as such. Rather, we have to do that process of designating or imputing upon them in order for them to exist as that.
Oh yeah, Tishindu, Ane Kambanala, Kawa Yemeta, Kambanala, Mi Yemessing, Kambanala, Mi Yemessing, and meet the Suri. Kambanala mi na kambanala mi wari said mi said mi the surisana mi the Dutch tant kambanala manakaso mi di yeme mi di yana yo mi yore di mena mi yo mare said mi the surisana kambanala mi na dashita na kambachi meba di na mi chi meba Kambatela Kawa Yoare Sirigana Kawa Yeme Diana Kawa Yoare Kampana Kawa Mese Kawa de Suresana Kamin Kawadi Kodashitana Tani Meba Mi Shiva Toba Tawa Zamato Kaminado Mi Chopala Dene Dashi Udikana Mi Shit and the Taba Zamado Kindi Mi Yemechi Kamala Mi Yemechi Jondo Chinga Mi de Suresana 당한도 된다 누구한테 나라 누구한테 나라 미예다 매그 예매그 제수 정도 뒤에나 미여와래 뒤에나 미여 말해지 제수 정도 제사기 미리 수리했으나 다수가요 맞잖아 라 레레레잖아 아니 제수 정도 생각 말해봐 미예스 그러 미예매 제수 정도 생각이 뒤에나 미여와래 뒤면나 미여 말해 생각 미리 수리했으나 미예매지 다 지라잖아 지엠매봐 지엠매봐 이자 미세에 가려서나 다시 초발할 때는 따바 잠도 해봐 제시도 가와리나 가와레 캄바딜라 가와 예매싱에 가와디 가와 예다메 디에나 가와 요아리 디에나 가와 요아메 가와 요아레 베스나 가와 요아레 세르와 가와 예매제 가와디 수레스나 다 가와레레레레 때는 매봐 오나 가와디 가와레스나 가와 초발때라 미게 따바 잠도 해봐 that's
So here we designate things on particular bases, but when we try to search for that thing, we can't actually find the thing so designated. So, for example, if you have like a house and there is a person in that house, and you say, well, like you try to search for the person beyond just someone that is designated upon a group of aggregates, you say, well, who is that person? What exactly are they? Well, you can't like find that person that you, as it appears to you. There's someone that is designated on the basis of a particular set of aggregates. But when you try to say, well, find that actual person, there's nothing that you can find. Or if we say, like, in this assembly hall, there are pillars, and we have those things that we point to as being pillars. But if you like are looking for a sign, well, what makes something a pillar or not a pillar? You can't like find something from the side of the pillar that is this like pillarness, but rather this is something that has merely been designated on the basis of a certain accumulation of parts and so forth. So when we are searching for the actual thing, like we could say, well, here in this this assembly hall there are people, but if you try to search each of the individual people and find that like people-ness or that person-ness, you can't find it in any of the individual people or in that group of people, but rather these are all things which are merely designated by the force of thought. We can't find something from the side of an object which defines it or gives it that particular characteristic from its own side, absent of that designation of it. So this is the case with everything that we designate, like when we say pillar or when we say person. There could be a person here, but when you try to search for and find what is it that like personness or something, you can't find that. That's something that isn't findable.
Oh yeah, 다들 다바자리 대신도 쳐 탐제장 다시 초발할 때는 그와 다시 초발할 때는 최대한테 매개 파샤바자리 그와 다시는 마드바 아니 그런 거는 투두를 주바지와 말했어 다시 휴가나 신천이 그와 다시 초발이 여와 인자 아니 감바지 나네 가와야 돼 가위 다시 초바디 여와 인자 고 가와야 가와텔라 지다 체라니 연구를 와지 지다 체라서가지고 가와치 가와 생각지 다 니나는 니나게 가와 가가 가위 체라래 좋아 다 가서래 가와치고 가와셔서 다 가위 지대 가와 탐제를 제수 중간에 지시 가와 생각지 민게 다파찬데면도 잘 매야다
So this is the case for every sort of existent entity. There's nothing but a name and a concept. So we can apply a particular name to a basis of designation. Like we could say here in this assembly hall there is a pillar, but when we try to search for, well, what actually is the pillar, we just find that basis of designation upon which we have given the name pillar. And there is a sort of the when we say pillar, there's a general idea of like a generality of what a pillar is. And this, so like pillar is a particular instance of that generality, but there isn't something from the side of that object that makes it a pillar. It's merely designated by the force of thought, there's nothing besides that basis of designation that we can find when we search out for that object.
Oh yeah. That today in the top of Tazamina, Anita Casare, top of Tazamina, any Delaswana Shin, Churton Jota Patazamina, Anita Tala Pungushan, Sella Rata. Anita Tilipa, Sel Tala Pungus Tacho, Sella Rati Tacho, and the Gawala Pumashi Tacho, that did Tacho Maritz, that Mijo by the Karsana, that Dashitama in Mikshavasungur. One a chula, Duzame, one a churta Pata Zamina, Sella Radang, Gawala Pumbata Botana, Te Chuchokam Yamna, Te Mijo de Pata Zamina, and
So, this we call this, and that we call that, applied to the collection of parts that act as the basis of the particular entity's name. But there does not exist the single tiniest bit of anything that is some kind of object on its own, divorced of the parts we give its name. So there's no object from its own side, aside from the sort of parts or the basis of designation to which we give that name. Well, then you might have the thought, well, then you might think to yourself, if every object is nothing more than what we label it, then I can just go out and call gold brass, or I can call a pillar a vase, and that's just what they will be. So one might think that you can just sort of name things willy-nilly without any sort of basis for it. But that's not how it is. It's not that we can just apply any sort of label to anything. We do not say that things are just labeled what they are, but for the label to be applied, the basis that gets it must be a reasonable one for the particular label. So it's not that the basis is the thing labeled, but it needs to be a reasonable basis for a particular label.
Oh yeah, that day, that's what Kazan Shua na Shin, and Tatala drew the Tawadang. Tatala drew the Yamdo, Tatala drew the Tawa, Toba Tawa Tetana, and Dashi Tata de Ruji Dashi Kase Dashi Tamamewa. Dashi Pumbo la Dana, Mashi Tawa la Dana, and Dashi Pumbo de, and Dashi Tamayimba. That is Chabashon.
Oh, so like the example of when you see a striped rope and you think snake, that is not actually a valid basis for giving that label of snake. The striped rope is not a valid basis of designation for the term snake. Whereas when we have the collection of the aggregates and designate the person, the I, on the basis of that, that is a reasonable basis of designation for the self or for the person or the I.
Oh yeah, that they like Kazan Shua Tamaso, that I do so yeah.
No. So we'll stop there.